One of the questions I had for each of you is, how would you characterize the state of cybersecurity as it relates to physical security devices and systems?
I'll take that because full-time, that's my complete focus as an analyst. The state of security is very poor. And I've been saying that for about a decade. The difference is in the past couple of years, the industry is not being just dismissive like I'm crazy. The industry is taking notice, and I think they're no longer in the part of saying that's not important, our customers don't care, so we're not going to do it and nothing can happen. I don't think they yet realize the full impact of what can happen, what gets exploited, how it gets exploited, how poor the current commonly accepted architectures are. Right now we have an architecture in physical security. It's a wall-to-wire. It's 30 to 40-year-old architecture, and we have companies basically coming out with a new feature here and a new feature there, but ultimately it's still Betamax, right? It's like Betamax in a streaming world. It's at some point you have to say, look, information security has come out with new architectures and iterated. Is it perfect? No, but right now the attack surface is basically similar, and we haven't changed the architecture. And the problem is that we have a lot of entities that have invested in that model, and there are some entities that don't want to see that model change. And then on the other side, there's a lack of awareness of those that could elect for a different type of architecture and a different approach, but they're not aware of it. So you have architecture's problem, you have code that's being produced. Generally, it's not a mature industry that doesn't understand that they're not producing good code. So out of the box and into the wild, when it gets released, it has vulnerabilities all over the place from what I've seen. And then you have end users that are still grasping on the industry common practices, but they're far from best. And those need to be improved. So we have those three fronts to make improvements, but there is a bright spot, and that bright spot is the industry as a whole no longer is in denial. If I'm at a table and I mention cybersecurity, it used to be, hey, be quiet or leave. Now it's if anybody told me to be quiet or leave, the rest of the table would tell them, hey, why don't you leave? So we're making progress, and I'm happy about that. The challenge now becomes that, like any other industry, we saw this happen in information security, as soon as you have that initiative, now everybody is an expert. Everybody wants to provide that service. And it's dangerous because it's in the context of networks and air gapping networks or network admin, but the domains of cybersecurity go far broader and deeper than that. So I get concerned with a lot of the entities that are now providing cybersecurity advice, cybersecurity services. They are not going to be able to provide the type of expertise that the customer deserves. And so I think that's what I'm seeing now, but that's part of the evolution.
What are some of the other common misconceptions that the corporate security world has as it relates to the hacking community?
So I'll take that one.
What they wouldn't do.
Sorry?
What they wouldn't do. That's what I get all the time. Oh, hackers wouldn't do that. I'm not worried about that. And then I turn around and say, how many hackers do you know? Turns out they don't know any, right? And so the biggest gap when I go in and do an assessment for physical security is they assume what hackers wouldn't do, but they don't know any of them. And so they skip the step. They go right to technology, talk to the vendor, what technology, and assume that these features are going to go ahead and defeat hackers. But the reality is you have to anticipate who, what would they want to do against your organization, what methods would they use, and then only once you go ahead and have that idea, you can build some sort of controls. But it all starts with, do I know who my adversary would or wouldn't be? And when they assume that they know who a hacker is or isn't because of what they see on the news, they immediately start down the wrong path.
And what are some of the things that you think may be on the horizon? I know, Valerie, you touched on PAX ransomware potential, which is something I don't think anybody has on their radar in the physical security world at all. So, can you talk a little bit more about that and, some other attacks that all of you see coming down the pipe?
Sure. I mean, up until this point, usually when hacker types get access to the packs, it's to enable their access, to let themselves in or to let one of their team members in, or to add extra access to a card that they may have cloned or a credential. But if we look at it in the same model that we use for ransomware on the cyber side, it's very easy to manipulate who is in what access group and remove those people from the access group. Evacuate the facility for one reason or another, which could be done remotely if you know what you're doing. Anonymous tips on phone lines and whatnot come in quite handy in situations like that, because most likely they won't be ignored. And then when the all clear comes, oh wait, we can't give an all clear because nobody can get into the building. And I think that might be an interesting variant, let's call it, of ransomware that starts to target the gray area between cyber and physical security. It's not really well understood by either party, so therefore makes the best target.
Seeing a lot more supply chain hacks going down. I've been aware of all these investigations where it's like I'll broaden up like top 10. Most of the top security companies have been hacked themselves independently, whether it's public or not. And then their package updating systems get compromised, and it goes all the way down to a specific target. Or so like it turns out, as you brought up earlier, it was like hackers don't really follow process and procedure. Well, actually, security companies often do the same thing. They don't, and so there's a lot of companies that just like their private keys that sign the packages that they push, and then their firewalls are compromised from the packaging system in the supply chain. So they're not going at the front door, but they're going through all the way back to go after maybe one target when they compromise technically the whole globe. But I mean, I've seen a few of those actually in recent times that haven't hit the news, and some have. But those are the supply chain attacks. It's just before as an independent, you had to be really good at your game and really knowing that process. But if you now everyone's like, I worked at NSA or at the People's Republic of China, etc. All this. Now they're free agents and they see those supply chain attacks and they've done them. They're like, okay, now I'm a free agent. And then saying people from NSA are doing that or any other groups, but this is becoming more common knowledge, more framework that people see. There's more tools are built for that, so that it saves a lot of the time and development to get to that level. And so now you're able to compromise legions of companies from one point, from the back door.
From a loss prevention side or physical control system?
Intellectual property, access control, across the board.
Okay.
Across the board, yeah, definitely across the board.
Every organization today loves to, especially since the Target breach, they talk a good game about how they're forward thinking and they're really putting resources into cybersecurity. Do you think that's the case? Are they investing in the right ways?
Vendors?
Organizations?
Generally, no, they're not. On the physical side, they're not. Maybe they're asking a few more questions. Maybe they're borrowing a little bit from their cyber teams that don't understand the physical access architecture, which is a little bit of an anomaly if you're thinking like an information security person. It's not logical that you would have controllers that have no authorization layer, that don't talk to anything else. No, and I mean, unless you're really doing a threat model to begin with, because the industry methodology is to do an environmental study. What's likely in this region, what are the statistics, like an actuary model, vandalism, life safety. But I mean, I go out and work with Fortune 500 every day, Fortune 10, Fortune 100, and I don't even come across any that have actually done a targeted actor assessment. That's already done. Usually it's very environmental, let's go ahead and tier our facilities. If it's tier 1 against this, if it's tier 2 against that. But for me, that's a lot of spending a lot of money to do broad strokes with very little targeted return where my risk really is. So I see a lot of mistakes there, not enough work. There is a desire though but a lot of organizations don't know what they don't know, and they're skipping that step of defining the who, defining the what, defining the control. I can tell you right now, 9 times out of 10, they already have the vendor in talking about features before they've done any of this stuff. And when I work with new clients, the first thing I do is I get them to commit that until we're into phase 2, no vendors come in. We need to know what demands we're gonna place on them so we can evaluate, whether they have the right architecture, the right features, to be fair, to their time. Going back to one of your things saying, what are the hacks that I think are gonna be on the rise as well, is physical security is not gonna be an anomaly. It's gonna move toward services over connected devices. We're gonna start cutting cords, it's gonna be more connected, and we think that physical security is exploiting devices, and that's true, there's no doubt about it. But I'm gonna start exploiting those devices to get to the services that trust those devices. So you might think you're on an air-gapped network and nothing's gonna get in, but if I go ahead and gain the trust of that services because it thinks I'm a certain device, I got services in the back that are trusting me, and then I have other services that trust that service. And the physical security market, they're still struggling with securing their devices. They're building very insecure applications. They're not ready to be in a service ecosystem yet, but it will move forward, and I think that's where you'll have mass exploitation that is very scalable beyond just the device at a certain access point.
Yeah, the point you're bringing up, like what we're seeing is the future. Also, like when he said, we're not doing internal risk assessments for what we need. I work a lot.
Well, the risk assessments are doing are based on an old methodology.
Correct. Yeah.
That don't account for how will exploits impact my operations. If I can't manufacture product, I can't ship product, I can't transact money, I can't manage my supply
Right.
chain, I can't get shipments in and out. Let me tell you, you're gonna get a call from the CEO a lot quicker than that $10,000 piece of equipment that got compromised. And the current methodology, the industry methodology, doesn't account for it. That's the issue.
Yeah, and then further down the chain, which is like the difference between like the CISO or the director of physical security, with the let's say the YouTube shooting the other year, with a lot of companies in the Valley, all of them had budgets all of a sudden for physical security. They're like, what do we need to care about? Oh, we also need to care about online, because that's where the people are planning. And so now they're like, oh, what do we do now? And now everyone's like, I don't know what to do, because this used to be just really that the one part I'm talking about, intelligence only and cyber. Turns out it's all blended now, because like this, people aren't meeting in bars, they're meeting in forums.
It should be.
It should be, yeah. No, I'm saying, well,
The
yeah.
thread is blended. The program isn't yet.
Exactly, and
The
there's
program is
now doing that, and so like everyone had all of a sudden, you're like, I can't afford like a $10 stapler. Now it's like I have $1 million all of a sudden that I didn't at a public company, and those budgets are really tight compared to cybersecurity. It's like, oh, people are showing up with firearms at our offices, YouTube.
It gets the attention.
You need it's one incident.
Get
man,
some
one
management's
incident away.
attention to say, are we prepared? And then there are people who say, no, we're not prepared.
Mhm.
And say, okay, well, how much will it cost? And so it's not, they don't immediately open it up, but before we're C-levels in these type of companies, we're saying, and I go through it all the time, just you're getting what you're getting because everything looks fine, and it didn't happen last year. Something like YouTube happens, it's like, are we prepared? Hell no. And management was expecting, like, yeah, we're okay, we could use a little more. They're finding out, no, the news would find out there was a shooting before a lot of our own people would.
Yeah.
Okay, that's bad. What do we need to do? Well, you need to start spending a little bit as opposed to years past.
Yeah.
And, what would be your recommendations, as far as, how do organizations start to wrap their head around some of these issues? Where should they be investing, their resources, investing in people, things along those lines?
I think organizations need to follow Terry's example, or what he mentioned of being prepared to evaluate solutions. If you don't properly evaluate the risks and the potential mitigating strategies, you're not going to be able to implement it correctly. You should know what you're buying and not fall into the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the organizations are getting 20% of the functionality that they bought. They just bought some buzzwords because they didn't understand what they were trying to do. So they go out and spend the money, and they may be spending it in the quote unquote right area, but they're not leveraging what they bought because they don't know what they're trying to do. So it goes all the way back to the beginning. If you build on a shaky foundation, the end result's not going to be good.
And personally, it's like when I go in, it's like, what are your hard risks? I mean, just like, you bring in outside people who've been through federal programs, not just like, not just like, something that we didn't cover earlier was intellectual property theft, which is there's a ton of constant thefts in the valley where windows are broken, laptops are stolen, and people think they're being pawned off. But it turns out it's actually coordinated intelligence operations everywhere, organized crime. And so people are just going to the local PD, and they don't keep track of this other than it's a laptop and serial. You really need to go to the FBI because they keep track of it. And you're like, oh, Intel had 10 laptops stolen, different areas, but all these engineers were in one department. And the cops not gonna put the time into that. FBI totally will, because that becomes a national security issue. And then they have budget for that. So anyway, so basically it's like, you wanna get people at that higher level that can really that have a much broader picture than just like someone who deals with a robbery at a bank that's local. Unless that's what you need, because that's your risk profile. And so it's really understanding what your real risk profile is. So,
So I think
software,
going back to, I see focus on building, but most organizations need to rebuild their global security program, right? So most of them don't have very good or any concept of governance. So what are the things we want to control? How do we understand what the risk is, what the impact is operationally, as well as life safety and asset? Put together a program, invest in the people, and then make sure there are clear goals. Like, what are the outcomes? Then go ahead and consider doing the typical stuff around, what's gonna fit. Because otherwise, you might buy stuff, but if you don't have the right program and the right people, like Joe was saying, but ultimately too, you're gonna buy the wrong things. And that's a big waste of money. I'd rather go ahead and have less money for technology, but make sure I have a really good program and a good staff, and then place that technology in the hands of a capable program and capable people. I always tell my clients, look, 95% of your risk is in like less than 5% of your organization. So do I need to go ahead and do the old school rip and replace readers across the whole organization for $5 million? What's that gonna get me? Let's go in with a scalpel and really figure out how to spend where it's meaningful. And what I see is that's exactly what the C-levels in their organization are trying to get them to do. So when they go ask for $20 million and get shot down, management's really saying, we absolutely have to do this, we'll do this, we'll spend according to risk, and they help them understand the risk. Those are the projects I see actually go through. I think gone are the days of big forklift upgrades where every building tier gets ripped and replaced and gets this exact system. It's, tiering, it has its value to understand things, but if you're gonna go ahead and just, approach it like that, it's a big spend for little value, and executive management, they might not know security, but when I go in those rooms and do the business case, you find out very quickly they're actually very smart and ask these laser pointed questions that's like, yeah, that's a good question, you're kind of right. I'll go walk away and fix that, and I'll come back in 3 months when I get on your calendar, and then the whole project gets away from you. So you have to do that with that front line.